Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. This October, in honor of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, we're joined by a storyteller whose work invites us to see beyond labels and into the heart of humanity. Mila Maxwell is an Atlantic Canadian author, volunteer firefighter, and storyteller from Nova Scotia. Her debut novel, Finding Lady Baltimore, is inspired by her experience growing up with a sister who has disabilities. Through her writing, Mila explores the quiet complexities of family, identity, and belonging, reminding us that the stories shaped by difference are often the ones that connect us the most. Today we'll talk about what it means to live, write, and create from a place of empathy, and how fiction can help us see the truth of disability, inclusion, and love in a new light. Welcome to the podcast, Mila.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, before we start the interview, I'm curious, uh, why did you use the title Finding Lady Baltimore? Is Baltimore not in the US?
Yeah, it's a brand of luggage actually, and
Oh,
originally the book was called The Blue Suitcase, and I felt that that was very boring. So in the book, there's a suitcase that I find, and as I was trying to write the book, um, I wanted to describe what an old suitcase would look like. So I just Googled vintage blue suitcase, and the brand Lady Baltimore showed up. And I said, that's exactly what I had in my head. So that's what I
wow.
went with. And that became the title of the book.
I actually thought you named the book after the place Baltimore.
Yeah, it's funny because I had a podcast a few weeks ago with a man from Baltimore, and he thought that was kind of cool too.
Wow, I'm glad I asked the question because I was like, and I've had this concept in my head that it's after a lady in Baltimore. Oh, that's what the book is about. Okay, you know what inspired you to write the novel Find the Lady Baltimore?
I would say my sister Sarah and the relationship with her would be the main inspiration behind the book. Sarah has cerebral palsy. She's had it since birth, so it affects her mentally and physically. So, yeah, I've always been curious what being her is like, what her life is like. So, I decided to write a mostly fictional story, but there's a lot of truth within the book as well. So, that was a very healing process. It was a very eye-opening process because with Sarah, you can't really have those conversations on a deeper level because you might say, "Oh, Sarah, how are you?" and she'll say, "Fine," but that's it. So it was fiction was good in that respect because I had the opportunity and the freedom to play out what I like to think her life is like, knowing her. And I also was able to chat with other people that have disabilities but are more articulate and experience what their reality is like. And I also was able to talk to my parents, which was, I think, good for all of us. And they got to talk about things that were maybe difficult. So did I. So it was good for all of us.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. At what point in time, what was the moment? It could be realization events that made you get to a point where you say, well, this is a story I had to tell.
I think it came out of nowhere. It wasn't something that I thought, oh, in 5 years, in 10 years, I'll write a book about this. It was my husband and I were going to bed one night. We were having a conversation. He had said a few times in the past, you should write a book. He was, I think, more thinking a children's book.
Yeah.
Because I have a background in journalism, but it wasn't interesting to me to write a children's book. So yeah, we were going to bed one night, and as I was falling asleep, I got a sentence in my head that basically alluded to what if something happened to me that allowed me to see my sister's perspective. And I said, oh my gosh, that's a book. And I just ran with it, and I didn't stop until it was done. Yeah.
Wow. That's what we call a download of
Yep.
inspiration.
Yeah, it was strange. It was like full body, like chills. I was like sat up in bed and I grabbed a piece of
what
paper
was
and I said,
What was the exact word you said out loud? Archimedes, when he had an inspiration, he said the word eureka, and all these other persons had this word they said. Was there a word for you like that?
It was a sentence, and it's funny because the sentence that came and the name that came to mind isn't the name that I end up using in the book. And I have no idea where this came from, but it said Martha was only 17 years old when her entire life flashed before her eyes, except it wasn't her life at all. It was that of her younger sisters. And I was like, man, that's a book.
Damn.
Right? So every time I would like go to write and I'd feel maybe a little bit lost, or I felt like I was kind of going too far in a direction I didn't want to go, I would go back to that sentence. I had actually printed it off and put it on my wall behind my desk, and I would say, "Nope, I'm straying from what the original idea was." And I just kept going back to that over and over and over again.
Do you feel that growing up with a sister that has cerebral palsy gave you kind of like a, a better perspective in telling the story versus someone who, just had no one close to them that had cerebral palsy and is like, okay, I'm going to tell a story and I'm going to like, do some research and tell the story.
Yeah, because I got to see the good and the bad of it. I got to see her struggles, I got to see her fears. And I think I didn't know this at the time being younger, but I think, well, I know I'm very empathetic. I didn't know what to make of it when I was younger. I didn't know what that was. So this was a very good way for me to express that and to process and to heal those things that maybe in the past were too hard to experience. And I didn't know how to name them. I didn't know how to name the emotions that I was feeling. So writing became very therapeutic and very healing for me.
Well, as someone, the book is a work of fiction, right?
It is. There's a lot of truth in it.
Okay.
But I tried to write it as a memoir, but it wasn't working for me. I said it's too flat, it's too personal, and there was always something missing. Whereas with fiction, I was able to tie events that happened with things that maybe sort of happened, but didn't really tie the bow on what I had started to talk about, if that makes sense. So it allowed me to be more creative. It allowed me to use my imagination. And yeah, it allowed a layer of separation, I think, too, when certain things got too hard to talk about or hard to write about. And yeah, it allowed that
How did
creativity.
you, you say it's a work of fiction, but I already say most, I wasn't the one that wrote the book. Listening to you talk about the book, it's clear that the book was inspired from your own rich story, right? And how did you decide where your rich story ends? Where you're like, okay, this is my story. I have a sister, and I'm trying to tell the story from the perspective of this, but this is where my story ends, and this is where the fiction, the actual book I'm trying to write, this is where it begins.
I think it's so interwoven into one another that there's no beginning or end to that. It just seamlessly happened. And when I was writing it, I thought maybe I would write from childhood to now, and it was just too complicated. So the editors that I worked with suggested that I choose a time period, which happened to be 17, because that was a very tumultuous time for me. So yeah, I focused on that time period of my life and just had fun with it.
Okay. 17. So the book is not from, from, oh yeah, that's true. The opening line, you mentioned 17. Matter was, could you say that sentence again?
Martha,
Is that the opening
Martha,
line? Or you
no,
discarded it?
that's not even in the book. It was just the inspiration uh, that really just came to me in that kind of space between being asleep and awake. But yeah, Martha was only 17 years old when her entire life flashed before her eyes, except it wasn't her life at all. It was that of her younger.
Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Sisters.
What did you use as the opening line of the book?
The opening line or the opening chapter, I would say, is actually a conversation that really happened with my grandmother when I was about 5 or 6. And I remember we were there, we would go to their house for supper every Sunday night. And I remember, I don't know if Sarah had a temper tantrum or she did something that made me angry. And I said to my grandmother, I said, I wish Sarah was normal. And I prefaced the book by saying, in this book, you will hear that term. I don't prefer that term. I don't like that term. But in the early 90s, that was the way we talked. And I remember saying to grandma, I wish Sarah was normal. And she never made me feel badly about feeling that. She just said, she's going to teach you so many great things. You're going to learn so much by growing up alongside her. And well,
Wow.
I got a book out of it. So
Uh, uh, what are some, writing this book and living closely with someone with uh, disability? What are some misconceptions about disability? You wish people understood both in everyday life, the real life we're in, and also in literature. Writing about disability.
I think I'll preface this with a conversation or something that happened with my sister not long before the idea of the book came about. And I had gone home to visit, and she and I got in this silly fight about something that sisters fight about. And I remember feeling so badly about it. And normally, I live about 6 hours away from where my parents and sister live now. And I remember feeling so badly. And in the past, I would have just pretend that it didn't happen. And when I got home the next day, I actually called her and I said, Hi, I wanted to call and apologize about last night. I said, You didn't deserve what I said to you. And
Yeah.
she, I think in the past, I would have just assumed that she didn't understand. But just because she isn't able to reciprocate or isn't able to say, I get it, doesn't mean that she doesn't. So I think a misconception is that just yeah, it people think that because they can't speak the way quote normal people do, that they don't understand, but they do. And another example could be there's a little girl that used to go to the same daycare as my son, and I think she's nonverbal. And, I said to my son, I said, Do you ever say hi to Emma? And he said, Well, she can't talk to me. And I said, Yeah, but there's a human being in there. So the next day he went to daycare and he said, I talked to Emma today and I just looked at her and I waved. So it's just to make people realize that there's human beings, and just because they might express themselves differently than we do, doesn't mean that they don't deserve the same amount of respect.
Oh, you said your book is about giving voice to the quieter stories within families. And for me, I'm curious, what was the most healing part of writing this novel for you?
It was bringing walls down that I had built up around experiences, around myself, around the relationship with my sister, my parents. There were just things that we didn't talk about. And I think we all wanted to talk about them. We just didn't know how. And I had a lot of resentments, which unfortunately trickled into my friendships, my marriage, my relationship with my son. So actually having those hard conversations, and I think I was afraid, especially of my dad, of feeling rejected by him if I asked questions. And I think that was one of the most healing relationships because we were able to talk about things that we didn't normally talk about. I was actually afraid of him reading the book. I was afraid of how he would feel. I felt that maybe he would feel that he wasn't a good dad, or he was too emotional, or he was too this or that. And when he finished it, and he actually sent me a message that night saying, your feelings were valid. Your feelings are valid. And I'm proud of you for writing this. And it was just like, all the weight that I had carried around me for so long was just not there anymore.
Wow. During the writing process, I'm not talking about when you completed the book now, like, while you were still writing the book. Was there a specific probably chapter, scene where you just realized, probably while writing or after writing it, you realized that you were healing part of yourself, where the realization just came, like,
Yeah, I can't remember a specific chapter or specific part. I think for me it was just that I had kept a lot of myself hidden. I always thought, I have it easier than she does. I don't need to complain. I shouldn't complain. What I'm feeling doesn't matter. And I think I reached a point before I started writing this book that I was like, no, there's probably other people out there that feel the same way that I do. So sharing this story, especially as a fictionalized version of it, it it allowed me to not feel that I was complaining when I was expressing myself and expressing what I was feeling. But it also gave me hope that people that are maybe growing up alongside siblings with disabilities or family members with disabilities can see themselves in it and maybe feel that they're not so alone and that what they're feeling does matter.
Oh, uh, we were talking about the book. For writers listening who are afraid to tell their own personal truth, or write stories that it's how do I explain it now? It's not just any story. It's a personal story that has a lot of layers that you need to unpack. What advice would you give them about turning pain into purpose through storytelling?
I think it depends. Everyone, I think, has a creative outlet. You just have to find what it is. And in my case, it was writing. And I don't think you need to have a background in creative writing. I certainly didn't. I had a journalism background, which is a much different style of writing. It's more concise, it's more literal. So it was surprising for me. And if you would have said, oh, I wrote a work of creative fiction, I would have never guessed that that was in my my future. But I think it depends. Like, you don't have to necessarily write it to publish it. You can just write it to express it, almost like a journal. And if you decide down the road that you do want to publish it, you can have it edited. You could have it read by some friends or some beta readers. So just don't overthink it. And there's a lot of things that I wrote that didn't make its way into the book. I might have had a day that I didn't feel creative. I didn't feel up to writing, and I just said I would write what was on my mind. But a lot of it was never made itself into the book. It's
Yeah.
just a Word document on my desktop.
Yeah. While I was reading your intro, you wear many hats, right? You're an author, you're a volunteer firefighter, you're a mother, you're a wife, but so far we've been talking about you as a sister. I'm curious, those hats, did they inform or influenced, the creativity of the book? Because so far we've been talking about you as a sister. Even the sentence that inspired the book is seeing the perspective of your sister, so it's the sister. So I'm curious, all those other roles and hats, you as a volunteer firefighter, a journalist, mother, a community member, those hats, play a role into the book.
Some of them, yeah. There is a fire scene in the book that was kind of
Okay.
unplanned. Yeah, it was kind of a joke with a couple of the men that I'm on the department with. They were kind of just saying, like, everyone makes jokes when you're writing a book. Oh, am I in the book? And one of them was like, is there a fire scene in the book? And I said no, and I hadn't really planned on it, but there is. But yeah, a few lifestyle things made themselves known into the book, but think, yeah, growing up with Sarah made me into who I am. And I think seeing what she is unable to accomplish makes me want to accomplish everything. Makes you want to strive to be, okay, you know what? I have the ability to do this. I have the opportunity. So don't take it for granted.
Yeah. And so far, you've written this book and published it. Earlier on, you shared the response of your dad um, to the book. What has the response from readers, from your siblings and other persons?
It's been surprising. I didn't worry because I wrote this for myself, and I said, great, if it sells a bunch of copies, awesome. But the response to it was surprising, and I wasn't really expecting a lot of it to be what it was. And for instance, my father has friends that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, males that read it that resonated with it. And mom said I think it's because a lot of these men had daughters, so they could see themselves as, working dads and the relationships with their daughters. They could see the dynamic between the mom and the dad, maybe some secret conversations that the kids weren't always privy to. So yeah, it surprised me. It didn't just resonate with people that grew up like I did with a sibling with a disability. It resonated with a lot of people. And I think it's just that human experience that everyone can relate with. We all have struggles. We all have things we hide from other people, hide from ourselves maybe. So yeah, the response has been very good.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead, how do you hope Finding Lady Baltimore continues to inspire conversations about empathy, disability, and family.
I think it just shines light on just because people like me grew up in that environment doesn't mean that we're better than anyone, doesn't mean that we're necessarily more understanding. Um, it might make us grow up faster. It might make us more empathetic, more understanding, but we still struggle too. I still struggle. So just because I grew up with Sarah doesn't mean that I understand every disability, doesn't mean that I always know how to talk to someone that might have a disability. So I'm not better than anyone. But I think it's just being open to understanding what other people are going through, whether they're disabled or not. We all have needs.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mila. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I did prepare a lightning round just so we
Oh
can get to
gosh.
know some a little about you. We talked about the book. You ready?
I think so.
What's one word that best describes your sister?
Loving.
Okay. The first book that ever made you cry.
Ooh. There was a book called Icebound, and it's this doctor that lives in Antarctica, and she finds a lump on her breast and she has to do her own biopsy. I think that
Oh,
was that was the first book that I was like, "Oh man." Mm.
okay. If Finding Lady Baltimore were a song, what genre would it be?
I'm not really sure, honestly. Instrumental?
Ah, what happened to all the words? Ah, okay. Coffee, tea, or long coaster walks?
Ooh, all three? Double fisting?
Mm, can I have it all? You have to
I
pick
do
one.
love coffee.
Okay. What's a line? This one is kind of tricky. What's a line from your book, or that always grants you?
That always grounds me?
So I'm asking you your favorite line from the book. It's tricky.
I know. I might have to read through it. Oh, she'll teach you all that and more.
It's in your book.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's
No,
at the
you.
beginning and the end.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What's one small act of inclusion that can change a day?
Just say hi to someone. And whether they say hi back doesn't mean that they don't hear what you're saying.
Okay. And the last one is finish this sentence. Storytelling is.
Healing.
Oh, thank you so much. That's all for the light there, and you did great.
Oh, I was
uh,
so nervous.
yeah, where can listeners learn more about the book and also connect with you?
I am on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and it's just Mila Maxwell author. I'm a little bit on TikTok, but I'm not very good at it. And yeah, I think Instagram and Facebook would be the best ways.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I would add the relevant links in the description so listeners can just click and go directly to the site. Thank you so much, Mila.
Thanks for reaching out, Wisdom. Good
Yeah.
night.
That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.